Every evening before darkness falls, a man rings a bell throughout the town. As soon as they hear the sound, everyone immediately drops what they are doing and heads back home. As the sun sets, doors and windows are tightly shut and an amulet-bearing stone is hung on every house. Because once night falls, this town no longer belongs to humans. Countless monsters emerge from the forest. They take the form of dead people, lure others to open doors, kill them, and even eat their intestines. By morning, they vanish back into the forest. Therefore, to save the people, Steve rings a bell every evening to warn everyone to hide in their homes before the sun sets. Even 6-year-old children obey him. For 96 consecutive days, no one in this town had become a prey to those monsters. But now, that record was about to be broken. Because on that same night, a man in the town was lying heavily drunk inside a bar. In that condition, sending him home was impossible. Therefore, the bar owner was forced to lock all the windows and doors and leave him there to sleep. However, on the other hand, his wife and young daughter were alone at home. Long after it had gotten dark, when her husband still hadn't returned, the wife tightly locked the door and went inside with her daughter. As the night grew deeper, the little child began to pray for her father. Suddenly, she heard her grandmother's voice at the window. She immediately went there and pulled back the curtain. Looking closely, she saw her dead grandmother standing outside. She told the child that it was very cold outside, and she just wanted to come inside for a little while. The innocent child fell into her trap and began opening the window. But by the time her mother went upstairs, it was already too late. The next morning, when that drunkard returned home, he saw that the people of the entire town had gathered outside his house. Before he could ask anything, Steve gave him a hard slap. Because this wasn't the first time. Steve had explained to him many times that in houses with children, windows must always be kept nailed shut, because in this town, children fall for the monster's deception the easiest. But every time, he had ignored this advice. And because of that single carelessness, his entire family fell victim to the monsters last night. When he saw the shredded remains of his wife and daughter lying on the ground, he dropped to his knees right there and started weeping bitterly. But now there was no use crying over spilled milk. Steve was even more furious because he hadn't just gotten his family killed, but had put the entire town in danger, because this place had a terrifying rule. Whenever someone died here, a new person would come and get trapped in this town. And truly, the exact same thing happened. The day that woman and child's funeral was taking place, a car arrived in this town. Everyone was shocked to see new people arrive so soon. Steve immediately signaled everyone to remain silent and began questioning the family himself. When he found out they had lost their way and ended up here, he signaled them to move forward without saying anything. However, the real game was about to begin. A short while later, the man drove the car ahead. Initially, he thought they would soon get out of this place, but as soon as they went a little further, he was terrified because driving in circles, they had ended up right back in the same town. First, he thought perhaps he had taken a wrong turn, so this time they started leaving from a different direction, but still they arrived back at the same town. Then he took a third route, but this time too, the road looped around and brought him right back to the same place. Now it was clear that no matter which direction they tried to escape from, the road wound around and brought them back to this town. Seeing them circle around repeatedly didn't surprise Steve at all. It was as if he already knew this would happen. In fact, he had intentionally not told them the truth because he wanted them to realize for themselves that escaping this mysterious town is impossible. When he felt the time was right, he scattered thorns on the road to make the car stop. But right then, an accident occurred, and their car overturned directly into the forest. All 4 people were badly trapped inside. The man himself was stuck in the driver's seat among tree branches. His wife was unconscious, and it was unclear whether she was even alive. The only relief was that the little daughter wasn't hurt much, but the younger son's condition was the worst. A thick tree branch had pierced right through his thigh. Meanwhile, Steve was waiting for them to return, but after a long time, when that family didn't return, he sensed something was wrong. Therefore, he immediately took some men and went out to look for them. As soon as he saw the overturned car in the forest, he wasted no time and jumped into action. Within minutes, 3 members of the family were pulled out, and those 3 were sent back with his men. Slowly, darkness began to fall. Steve looked at the amulet-bearing stone in his hand, because in this desolate forest, that was now his last hope. Then he hung that stone inside the car. Jim was completely shocked to see this. He didn't understand how a single stone could possibly save their lives, but instead of answering, Steve first sealed all the open parts of the car. Then he started explaining to Jim what was going to happen as soon as darkness fell. But right then, the boy's body began to tremble violently, and the next moment, a terrifying growl was heard from outside the car. Suddenly, the sound of someone screaming echoed from outside. It sounded as if someone was pleading for help, but Steve immediately understood that this was a new trap set by the monsters, who tear apart human bodies and eat their internal organs. And if Jim genuinely wanted to see his son alive, he had to stay inside the car at all costs until morning, because as soon as the sun rises, all those monsters vanish on their own. Hearing this, Jim finally calmed down. But little did he know that back on the other side, his family returning with the rescue team was also trapped in a big trouble. In fact, their car suddenly got a flat tire on the way, and out of compulsion, everyone had to return to the safe house on foot. But it was nighttime now, and in this darkness, those bloodthirsty monsters were roaming everywhere outside. As soon as the people inside the safe house saw them wandering outside, they sounded the alarm without wasting a single second. In an instant, the entire house went on high alert. No matter how much the people outside hammered on the door, no one opened it from inside, because at night, no one knows who is human and who is a monster. But little did they know that the real monsters had already quietly appeared right in front of them. Suddenly, one of the monsters started talking to Julie. He kept calling her name, as if he knew her from before. Seeing this, Julie's eyes instantly went blank. It was clear that she had fallen into the monster's trap. Fortunately, the deputy sheriff shot the monster in time, but even after getting shot, it had no effect on him. When everyone's life was on the line, the leader immediately told the bald man to open the door, and that's how everyone's lives were saved. However, as soon as they entered, Julie and her mother were tied up. But at that moment, the mother wasn't worried about herself. Rather, she was worried about her husband and daughter trapped in the car. Meanwhile, outside the car, the screams and cries of the monsters hadn't stopped. Some had even slowly climbed onto the car's roof. In this situation, Steve told everyone to stay calm. He assured them that as long as the amulet-bearing stone was hanging in its place, no monster could step inside the car. And truly, after a little while, all the noise outside stopped and silence spread everywhere. It felt as though the danger had temporarily passed, but the real trouble was still yet to come. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, Jim woke up and unknowingly took down the amulet-bearing stone. The doctor tried to stop him immediately upon seeing this, but it was already too late. Suddenly, the doctor woke up and realized that this was all just a bad dream. In fact, those people had safely spent the night. As morning broke, the rest of the people also reached there to help them. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief seeing them alive. However, the danger wasn't completely over yet, because now the newcomers had to make a difficult decision. They had to choose where to stay in the town. On one side was the safe house, where everyone lived together, but space was limited. And on the other side were individual houses across the town where there was more space, but the danger was equally high. If people decided to live in the town's houses, they had to check the amulet stones before darkness fell. And if there were children in the house, the windows had to be nailed shut. Because at night, monsters often tried to trick people into opening doors, and children fell for their words easily. Because of this, strict rules were also made in the town. If someone's carelessness caused another person's death, as punishment, they were locked in a tin room for one night. There were no amulets in there, meaning whoever went inside had almost zero chance of survival. Hearing this, Taby asked how many times this punishment had been given. The priest replied that it had never happened before, but tonight was going to be the first time. After explaining all the rules, Jim's family had to choose a house. Everyone thought all four of them would stay together in one of the town's houses. But then their daughter Julie said that she wanted to stay alone in the safe house. She felt that her mom, dad, and little brother loved her less, which is why she wanted to stay away from them. Hearing Julie's decision, Jim and Taby panicked because they were deeply worried about their daughter. So both of them started convincing her to come with them. Just then, Steve said that darkness was falling and everyone needed to head back to their respective places as quickly as possible. Steve assured them that his son also lived in the safe house, so Julie wouldn't be alone there, and he would take good care of her. After this, everyone went their separate ways because tonight was the time to administer punishment. The man whose negligence had caused the death of his wife and daughter was now going to receive his punishment. He was to be locked in the tin room for the entire night without an amulet, meaning if the monsters reached there, surviving until morning was impossible. Even Steve couldn't do anything for him. He just put 2 extra locks on the door and silently prayed that the man somehow survived until morning. But as night fell, those human-faced monsters came out of the forest. Meanwhile, that man was standing terrified in the corner of the room. But as soon as he raised his eyes, all those monsters had gathered outside his room. At that moment, his condition was like a prey surrounded by predators. Now there was no way out for him. Finally, he gave up, sat down on the floor, and began waiting for his death. The next morning, when Steve reached that tin room, his senses were blown away by the sight inside. Those bloodthirsty monsters had brutally torn that man's body apart, but even after seeing this horrifying sight, Steve didn't panic at all because he had seen such horrific scenes before. However, even after this incident, the cycle of death did not stop. This time, the matter directly reached the restaurant. Jim's family had just arrived in this town, so Steve was still explaining the night rules to them when suddenly Sarah's arm began to swell up in a strange way, and the next moment, terrifying letters reading, "Kill the boy," appeared on her arm. It was clear that this was somehow connected to Jim's son, but before she could understand anything, her entire body began to tremble violently, and the next instant, she collapsed and writhed on the ground. Yet the terrifying events didn't end there, because over at the safe house, something even more horrifying was happening. A man was continuously digging a deep hole in the ground, as if he were already preparing someone's grave. When the leader asked him why he was doing that, Victor replied that more deaths were going to happen here soon. Hearing this statement from Victor, the leader was startled. A little later, Victor reached Ethan. The two had never met before, yet there was a strange connection between them, because both of them could see the mysterious white-clothed boy who was invisible to anyone else. Victor had been seeing him since childhood, and the boy had saved his life multiple times, but then he had suddenly disappeared. Now that same boy was visible to Ethan, and the meaning was clear. A major danger was approaching. Thinking this, Victor decided that he needed to get to the bottom of this mystery. And just as he thought, as soon as he reached the forest, he saw that boy again, but the next moment, the boy vanished. Victor thought he might be hiding in the hollow of a nearby tree, because that area had many such trees, and no one knew where the insides of those trees led. Then Victor picked up a stone from the ground, carved a smiling face on it, and threw it right into the tree's hollow in front of Ethan. But the very next moment, somehow that stone flew back and landed right in front of them. Victor himself was shocked to see this. He stated that he had seen many such trees before, but had never seen a mysterious tree like this. As soon as he said this, he got a sharp headache and suddenly sensed a major danger. On the other side, Jim and his wife found out that their son was missing. Panicked, they ran toward the forest to look for him, but as soon as they reached there, a pack of wild dogs surrounded them. The attack was about to happen when suddenly, actually, that shot was fired by Victor so he could save their lives just in time. Then Jim and his wife caught sight of Ethan standing with Victor. Seeing him safe and sound, both breathed a sigh of relief. For a moment, they felt the danger had passed, but they had no idea the real trouble was yet to come. Meanwhile, Sarah had regained consciousness, but out of fear, she didn't tell the doctor about the strange marks that had appeared on her body. But this silence became her biggest mistake, because driven by that fear, the monsters once again took control of her mind. As night fell, Sarah quietly approached a patient, and without wasting a second, drove a sharp object straight into their neck. After that, she began talking to herself, as if striking a deal with some invisible monster. A little later, when the nurse came to check the ward, her senses left her upon seeing the dead patient. She began to run out of fear, but as she turned, she saw that the door was wide open, and those terrifying monsters were walking inside with ease. The next morning, when the deputy sheriff arrived there with his team, he saw that the amulet-bearing stone had fallen to the ground. The entire room was filled with human corpses, and that nurse had also become a victim of those monsters. But nobody in their wildest dreams imagined that behind all this was none other than Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah quietly reached outside Ethan's house. She was convinced that if she killed Ethan, she would fulfill her deal with the devil and in return win her freedom from this cursed place. Soon she barged right into Ethan's house and cleverly manipulated and persuaded him to come along with her. But she had no idea that this madness of hers was going to become the biggest mistake of her life. Soon she brought Ethan to a desolate farmhouse because her plan was that if she killed Ethan there, it would be easy to blame it on the monsters that came out at night. But just as she was about to strike the boy, her brother arrived there. Distracted by this, Ethan seized the opportunity, freed himself, and ran away. Meanwhile, her brother grabbed Sarah to stop her from doing anything insane, but during the scuffle, Sarah accidentally slit her own brother's throat. The scariest part was that the priest witnessed all of this with his own eyes, yet he didn't try to stop Sarah. He just stood there and stared at her. A short while later, a crowd gathered at the farm, but neither Sarah nor the priest was there. Only a corpse lay on the ground, spreading terror throughout the town. Because everyone knew monsters didn't attack during the day, so who had committed this murder? The strangest thing was that the priest had seen Sarah, but still intentionally hid her name. This meant something was definitely fishy. To calm the crowd, he stated that he had seen Sarah running toward the forest, and it was possible she was behind all this. Hearing this, Steve assured them that as soon as Sarah returned, he would take her into custody immediately. Hearing Steve's words, the people calmed down to some extent and slowly dispersed. However, little did anyone know that locked inside the basement beneath the church was that very fugitive Sarah. In fact, according to the town's rules, Sarah should also have been punished by being locked in the tin room. But instead of sending her there, the priest had secretly kidnapped her because his goal wasn't to save Sarah, but to find a way out of this cursed place. He knew Sarah could talk to monsters, and perhaps she could show him the way out. When Sarah realized the priest knew a lot, she revealed a big secret. According to her, if they agreed to the monster's terms, the townspeople could escape alive. The priest was startled to hear this. Before he could ask anything else, Sarah's body began to tremble violently. Panicked, she asked the priest for paper and a pen. Within moments, she drew a strange drawing. But when the priest saw the marks made on that paper, the ground slipped from beneath his feet. Seeing the drawing reminded him of something. In fact, every person who came to this town brought along some secret connected to this mysterious place. While the priest was tangled in these questions, a new man arrived in this terrifying town. But no one had any idea that his entry would take the story in a dangerous direction. Actually, that man had fallen asleep inside his car on the way, but as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw that the driver was gone. Before he could understand anything, Steve arrived there and handcuffed him to the car without a single word. The poor fellow had no idea what kind of terrifying place he had gotten trapped in. A short while later, he was taken directly to the safe house. But the people there were no less strange. They tied him up without wasting a second. In fact, the town had a very strict rule. Whichever new person arrived here was kept locked away separately from everyone else on their first night, because the first night in this place was considered the most dangerous. When morning came, the leader seated him close by and began telling him the terrifying secrets of the town. He said that as soon as the sun sets, dangerous monsters emerge from the forest and hunt humans all night until the next morning. Everyone thought this man would be terrified hearing this. In fact, that man, whose name was Zed, thought this was some sort of survival game created by his travel company. He thought that if he won this game, he would get a big prize. Fueled by this greed, he started searching for clues that very day. A little later, he reached an old basement and thought perhaps the exit was hidden right there. But as soon as he went inside, he saw a corpse lying behind the door. Startled, Zed fell down, but when he got up and looked again, the corpse was gone. In its place was only a strange mark. Seeing this, Zed immediately ran out of there, but his mind was still not ready to believe that sight was real. He felt the corpse in the basement might have just been an illusion. However, as soon as the deputy sheriff took him to the graveyard, the terrifying truth of this town unfolded right before Zed's eyes, because the buried man was none other than the driver who had left him behind and vanished. Shocked by this, Zed's condition deteriorated, so the sheriff brought him back to the station. Arriving there, the sheriff said that the town's most dangerous enemy wasn't just the monsters roaming at night, but the fear sitting inside human beings, because that fear makes people make mistakes that bring them closer to death. Therefore, if they truly wanted to escape from here, they needed to keep a cool head first. Just as he finished speaking, the radio started making noises. Hearing it, a new idea sparked in Zed's mind. Since Zed was an engineer by profession, he immediately grabbed the radio and ran outside. He thought that if he could fix this radio, perhaps he could contact the outside world. But he couldn't do this alone, so he went straight to Jim's house, because Jim had the best understanding of such systems. They pulled out all the usable parts from Jim's setup and built a temporary antenna. After that, Zed and Jim reached the highest point in the town to test the antenna. Jim immediately climbed a tree to test it. Just when it seemed everything was ready, a stream of blood suddenly began flowing down the tree. As he looked up, his senses left him. Several corpses were hanging from the tree branches, and the scariest part was that the same mysterious mark had appeared in front of him again. Before he could understand anything, a bullet whizzed past his ear. Zed ran for his life, but the attacking shadow kept pursuing him. Going a short distance, Zed fell to the ground, and the next moment that shadow stood right in front of him. Just as it was about to attack him, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly turned normal again. The blood on his body vanished too. Seeing this, it was clear that Zed had suffered another terrifying hallucination, but this time he was so badly terrified that he ran away before the test could be completed. However, he had no idea that as soon as he left, the radio finally picked up a signal. Although the signal was very weak, it was enough to prove that his plan was actually working. A short while later, darkness descended upon the entire town, and everyone went and hid in their homes. But during that time, a big trouble struck the safe house. At night, while everyone else was fast asleep, a man quietly got up and removed the window curtain. Outside stood a beautiful woman who was smiling strangely at the man. Seeing her beauty, the man's lust awakened. Without thinking for a second, he opened the window and invited her inside. Little did he know that this foolishness of his was going to unleash a new disaster upon the entire town. As the two got close, the beautiful girl's true face was revealed. Sharp nails popped out from her hands, and the next moment she sliced off the man's tongue. After killing the man, she didn't stop there. Reverting to her human form, instead of looking for the next victim, she opened all the doors and windows of the house one by one so the other monsters could comfortably come inside. Meanwhile, the people sleeping inside the house were completely unaware of the impending danger. Then a strange noise came from inside a room. Hearing it, Mary went inside looking worried, but as she reached near the room, the door suddenly slammed shut from behind. It was clear she had fallen into the monster's trap. Downstairs, people were still chatting when a drop of blood fell directly on the bald man. Before he could swear, his gaze landed on the terrifying monster standing above. As soon as they realized monsters had breached the safe house, panic spread throughout the house. People ran here and there to save their lives while the monsters hunted them down leisurely. It was now clear the safe house was no longer safe, so the leader made an immediate decision to get as many survivors to Steve as possible. Meanwhile, Ellis was still sleeping in his room. Then strange noises began outside. When he came out, his senses were shattered by the sight. The entire safe house was destroyed, and corpses were scattered all over the floor. Before Ellis could comprehend anything, a blood-soaked monster advanced toward him. Fortunately, Ellis didn't waste a second. He immediately smashed the window glass and jumped straight down from the safe house. But upon hitting the ground, he broke one of his arms. Yet despite the intense pain, he couldn't stop because several monsters were advancing toward him from behind. With his friend's help, Ellis somehow managed to run and hide in a small room. Now their last hope for survival was the amulet-bearing stone, which might keep them alive until morning. Right at that moment, in front of Steve in the town, another big secret was uncovered. The priest confessed that Sarah was imprisoned by him, and he had kept her hidden himself, because Sarah was the only human who could somehow communicate with those monsters, and perhaps she knew the way out of this cursed town. Hearing the priest's words, Steve was utterly shocked for a moment. He was about to ask her something when suddenly the sound of a car horn echoed from outside. When both ran outside, they saw the leader arriving in town with a few people. Their faces made it clear that something terrible had happened at the safe house. But as darkness loomed outside, just as the priest was heading back inside, a monster attacked him. Steve immediately fired his shot, dragged the priest inside the house, and locked it. But it was already too late. Too much blood had flowed from his body, and moments later, the priest breathed his last right there. In the blink of an eye, in just a single night, this town had swallowed countless lives. Steve now understood that waiting meant more deaths. If he had to save everyone, he had to find a way out at any cost. Thinking this, Steve went straight to the church basement where Sarah was kept imprisoned, because she was their last hope now. Steve knew very well that almost every place in the town had been searched. Only the forest remained, which everyone considered the den of death. He was convinced the real secret was hidden inside it. As darkness fell, they would venture out and the human hunt would begin. In such a situation, Steve had only one support: the amulet-bearing stone, relying on which he was holding himself together. A loud explosion rang out outside. Yet suddenly a strange light spread everywhere. This didn't look like normal torch or lamplight. It felt as though someone else was present in the forest besides them. When morning came, Steve went outside to look for clues, but the sight outside blew his senses. Spiderwebs were spread everywhere across the area. The condition was so bad that even recognizing the path was difficult. So, relying on memories of the previous night, he headed toward the spot where that mysterious light had come from. Suddenly, they heard someone screaming nearby. Steve rushed over without wasting a second, but upon reaching there, his senses left him. The person crying for help was no stranger, but his own dead wife. Somehow, Steve pulled his hand free and ran from there. But as soon as he reached a short distance away, swarms of spiders emerged from the bushes. In a split second, they swarmed over him, and many spiders climbed onto his clothes and body. He tried to shake them off, but it was too late because one of those spiders had already bitten him. Back in the town, people weren't sitting idle either. Zed and the others decided to build a tall tower to transmit the radio signal further so they could contact the outside world. After much hard work, the tower was finally ready, and the radio began picking up signals. But right then, the weather began to change abruptly. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. It was clear a dangerous storm was approaching. Time was very short, so contacting the outside world immediately was necessary. But no matter how many times Jim tried calling on the radio, there was no response from the other side. On top of that, the weather was worsening rapidly. It began to seem like this effort too would go in vain. But then suddenly, voices emerged from the radio. Jim immediately asked the person on the other end for help, but the next moment, his senses left him. He hadn't even told his name, yet the person on the radio already knew who he was. Meanwhile, in the forest, Steve and Sarah finally reached that mysterious light. In fact, that light was coming from an old lighthouse. Both thought that perhaps all their questions were answered in this very place, but just then, the poison spreading through Steve's body began to take effect. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and he was no longer able to take another step. Out of compulsion, he told Sarah to leave him behind and go ahead alone. He believed that if Sarah returned to the town alive and somehow managed to lead them to that tree, but as soon as Steve stepped inside it, the next moment, he was plunged directly into a dark and desolate cave. For a few seconds, He couldn't understand where he was. With trembling hands, he lit a lighter, and as he glanced around, his heart sank. He had reached some entirely different part of the town. Steve kept calling out to Sarah, but there was no response. Just when it felt everything was slipping out of his hands, a new bus filled with people suddenly arrived in the town. And with this intense suspense, part 1 of our story ends here. Part 2 is going to be even more interesting because some terrifying secrets present in the town will be revealed that will freeze the blood of anyone there.